Good to see you all, and welcome to 2020 and the Google community space. It's our first time to be in this space. My name is Wei-Tai Kwok. I'm one of the co-chairs of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter, and this is
Steve Richard. Hey.
We've been the co-chairs and had the pleasure to serve our chapter for the last 2.5 years, and this is actually our last event that we're going to do because we're going to transition to a new leadership team too. The Climate Reality Project was founded by former Vice President Al Gore, and we are the San Francisco Bay Area chapter. There are over 150 chapters across the United States that gather locally to tackle local climate activism efforts. And our chapter, which numbers something north of 700 people, we are the largest chapter in the country. So yeah.
Just wanted to point out the incoming chairs, Antonina over here, and Deborah Necky.
Starting next week.
Yeah, starting next week.
There you go.
Anyway, we're super excited.
Yeah. Another thank you I would like to extend before we get going is if you look on your tables, what do you see? You see some Arctic ice, right? We have our very own climate artist, Carter Brooks is here today.
Just to give you context, there are some things that we may only be able to bear witness to. Some of it is our melting ice, and part of the metaphor here is to have the ice witness our conversations as well. So enjoy the aesthetics, the obvious aesthetics for a climate artist is ice. And if anything gets unstable, falls over, whatever, you'll just deal with it. Just watch. But these all should probably be stable and sit fine. I have to leave and come back, so that's why I'm giving you that little bit of information.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for Carter. Okay, one thing that we do at the Climate Reality Project, we know many of us here are involved in taking action on the climate, so we have a little bit of sharing time where we invite anybody to stand up and in 30 seconds tell us what you're doing, what you want other climate activists in the room to know of upcoming activities, what are special things that you're working on, and so introduce yourself, what group you're with, and what you're doing.
So I'm Bill Weil. I used to run sustainability at Facebook and then Google and then Facebook. So much from memory. In 11 days, I and an amazing team of about 20 people are launching a new initiative. It's called Climate Voice. You are all invited to participate. We are going to push companies to speak up on climate policy everywhere they operate. And we're going to mobilize employees and students. So if you're employed, if you're a student, if you know people who are employed or are students, so basically if you're breathing, you can help. And if companies get engaged in climate policy, they can help counter, you're going to hear, I think, on electrification, what the natural gas companies are doing to try to stop it. If all the climate-friendly companies actually speak up, it can make a huge difference.
Thank you, Bill.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Warheit. I'm Executive Director of Fossil Free California. We work to get the money out of fossil fuels and into a just transition to a low-carbon economy. We are having a party on Thursday night, so you may have already shot your wad coming here tonight, but if you still have more party in you, please join us at the David Brower Center, Thursday evening, 6 to 7:30. It's a 1-block walk from the downtown Berkeley BART station. So if you got here, you can get there. And we work on the 2 pension funds in California. And I want to talk to Bill because we are also working now on a project about 401ks and potentially 529 plans to get those out of fossil fuels.
Hi, I'm Jeff Perrone, and I want to mention 2 things. One, my partner here has developed a website called earthrisingaction.org. And the website has a lot of documents that give you tools for how to affect government policy and also what you can do personally. It's very highly organized and well-researched stuff, so take a look at it, earthrisingaction.org. Also, one quick thing, we're also both involved in En-ROADS climate simulator training. So if you don't know about that, climateinteractive.org. It's a great tool for helping people understand what the policy options are and what they do. And maybe we could give a presentation here.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Barry Giles, Net Zero Existing Building Company. I'm sitting on Mayor Breed's task force for Net Zero, and I believe there are other people here from, hands up, come on, hands up, who are sitting on the task force as well. So we're working with the Mayor Breed and the San Francisco Environmental Department to remove gas out of San Francisco. And we're looking forward to getting the full support from Climate Reality and everybody in the team here so that we can move it on and get Mayor Breed's signature on the bottom of the piece of paper if we can do.
I'll jump in. Alice Sun, principal of Green Bank Associates. I'm actually launching tomorrow an independent research project to work with school districts to find out what they need in order to make zero carbon school districts. And that includes both K-12 as well as community college districts. And we're beginning with the Silicon Valley Clean Energy 13 communities. Anyone here from 13 communities in Silicon Clean Valley? Come talk to me afterwards. Looking forward to that.
My name is Matt Bogosian, and in a couple of months, it's going to be the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Earth Day Network, go on to Earth Day Network. There's a worldwide map. Every planning organization, every activity should be on that map so that we can track the movement worldwide. Earth Day Network, thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Brett Walter. I'd like to start, this doesn't count for my 30 seconds. I just
That
want
sure
to
does.
acknowledge that Steve and Wei Tai, the fantastic job they did as our gurus. They just recently got out of prison, if you want to know why I say that. You can talk to them afterwards. I'm a software guy, I guess most notably as VP of R&D at Symantec Corporation. I'm developing an app that will give people who are very concerned about climate action the motivation and means to take climate action on their phones in seconds. And I know that will be meaningful for a lot of you climate reality leaders who give presentations and then somebody raises their hand at the end and says, but what can I do? Give them the app. That'll be this summer. If anybody here is interested in being a user tester or a beta tester for this app, just look around for me, the tall, balding guy, and I'll get you signed up. Thanks.
Daniel Sahara with the San Francisco Climate Emergency Coalition. We've been pushing the city to actually act like it's an emergency. They passed a declaration declaring the climate emergency unanimously last spring. We're currently working on a natural gas ban in new construction and then sort of swiftly moving to retrofits. If you're interested in getting involved, whether that's meeting with supervisors, making some noise, and really making this a big issue for the board and for the mayor, please come by, let us know. We've got a sign-up sheet.
So I'm Robert Root. I'm a pediatrician and child adolescent psychiatrist, and I'll just mention two things. I was happy to get an op-ed in the Chronicle on 02/02/2020 about climate change and anxiety, and I think it's a very important issue, especially my focus with kids who are experiencing a lot of anxiety. And then you mentioned Earth Day. I just arranged for a big talk, one of our climate reality talks at the Peninsula JCC, specifically on Earth Day, to try to get a big audience.
All right.
Hi, my name is Bert Hill. I'm a director on the Golden Gate Bridge Board. We passed in October, did you know this? A climate emergency resolution. I can take great credit for it. David Rohde actually pressed them on, I've been pressing them actually for a couple of years on action. I did not say specifically the resolution, but he actually got the resolution passed. And we're starting to look at pressuring to changing the ferries over to electric.
Hi, I'm Diane Bailey with Menlo Spark. We're running the campaign for fossil-free buildings in Silicon Valley. We've been working since March of last year to transition all the homes and buildings on the peninsula off of fossil fuels like gas. We have a petition right here. If you want to support us, we've convinced 14 cities in one county to take policy steps to phase out fossil gas. Thanks.
All right, without further ado, we're getting ready to, I want to introduce Antonina Markov, who will preview tonight's speakers and program on natural gas. Go.
Welcome everybody. So just to underscore it, tonight is about policy action. And tonight is about policy action to get your city to go gas free. And tonight is about why it's so critical to go gas free as soon as possible. And tonight is about why it's so critical to go gas free with buildings that are built now, so that we really can be carbon neutral by 2045. We will start with their 60-second video, And I want you to pay special attention to the call for action in the last 5 seconds.
Did you know that gas appliances in our homes, like furnaces, stoves, and water heaters, are big contributors to the climate crisis? Gas-burning appliances account for about half of our home energy use. They also release invisible but dangerous pollutants that cause asthma and respiratory problems, especially in children. Gas lines can also leak or break, causing explosions and dangerous fires. Luckily, we have better, more reliable options we can count on. All electric appliances are safe, don't pollute the air in our homes, and can be powered with 100% clean, renewable energy. They are also far more efficient and can lower our energy bills. Choosing all-electric appliances is a win for our health, safety, and the climate, which is why cities around the country are clearing the path for a gas-free future. Tell your city leaders that your community wants to benefit from going gas-free too.
So the video asks us to tell your city leaders that we want to go gas-free. And that is our theme for tonight. To empower everyone here to achieve our goal of appearing in all of the 101 Bay Area cities this year to ask for gas-free homes and buildings. And now I'll turn it over to Rachel and Matt.
All right, thank you. All right, hello everyone. Thank you, Climate Reality Project, for having us tonight. Pretty excited to be here. Really inspired by all the people in the room. There are so many people who are taking action already, doing interesting work to solve the climate crisis. So personally just wanted to say at the top, I'm inspired by folks in the room. And I hope that with tonight we can give you an overview of some of the work that we're doing and encourage you all to take action. There's plenty of opportunity to make an impact, and tonight's presentation will go over that. Before we get into that though, just gonna share a little bit of background about us. Who are we? So I'm Matt. I'm a senior campaign representative at the Sierra Club. I work primarily with cities and counties across the state, helping them to advance building electrification policies. So it looks a little bit like technical advising for city staff and elected officials, and it looks a lot like working with community groups to ensure that the people on the ground have the resources and support that they need in order to pass these policies. I've been at the Sierra Club for about 3 years, and before that I organized across the Midwest and along the coast of California with the PIRGs. Some of you may be familiar, the Nader group back in the day. So really excited to be here tonight. And in my off time, I do a little bit of mountain biking, a little bit of improv comedy, some sci-fi books, you know, the fun stuff. Anyways, this is Rachel.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much for having us. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, lots of activists and experts, and it's really an honor to be here with all of you. So yes, I'm Rachel Golden. I'm Deputy Director of the Sierra Club's Building Electrification Campaign. I work with Matt on state level policy in California, as well as launching new campaigns across the US in about a dozen priority states to make sure that all the lessons learned and the progress and momentum we have here, we also are seeing across the US. So it's really a privilege and honor and such a joy to do this work. I'm really happy to be here with you all. Outside of work, I have a 3-year-old that might be watching this right now as part of his screen time, so we'll see how long he's on work. And I enjoy gardening and cooking and biking, so great to see you all.
All right, so tonight we are going to cover sort of a breadth of issues. So we're going to talk about the impact of gas use in buildings and how that is exacerbating the climate crisis. We're going to give an overview of building electrification and some of the technical terms and the technology involved. This isn't a subject that everybody has familiarity with outside of sort of energy wonk circles, and so we want to do a little bit of level setting. We're going to talk about some important stakeholder groups, so environmental justice communities and labor communities, and ensuring that those folks are part of these policy solutions. We're going to talk about the policy landscape here in California, where we are today and what needs to change in order to see large-scale adoption. And then we are going to talk about local opportunities for folks in the room to make a difference, how you, sitting here today, can go into your community and either support this action if it's already started or inspire its beginning if it hasn't.
At a high level, We all, I think, are here today because we recognize that gas use in buildings is exacerbating the climate crisis, and that we won't be able to achieve our climate goals and mitigate the existential threat of climate change without shifting off of gas. So a study came out a few months ago, the New York Times covered, basically showing that the biggest driver of greenhouse gas emissions globally is natural gas, which we just call gas. And how do we use gas, right? Gas ends up in all different sectors of the economy. So if you look at the US and how gas is consumed in the US, it's consumed about a third, a third, a third. A third of our gas goes to power plants, a third to buildings, so that's direct use in buildings for space heating, water heating, cooking, those sorts of activities, and then a third to industry. So here at Sierra Club, we're focused on zeroing out gas use across the economy using supply and demand side strategies to get to zero by 2045. And that's not where we are today. The gas industry is advancing and expanding their customer base rapidly. So this is a stat from American Gas Association showing that every minute of every day of the year, one new house gets connected to gas. So that means over 500,000 new homes are connected to the gas system every year. So this is a trend that we need to stop and we need to reverse. And ultimately, we need to start disconnecting homes from gas and hooking them up to 100% clean energy. So that's sort of the basis of our campaign and the work that we're doing with other advocates across the US. And then how we get to this work in California is that California is one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gas emissions from buildings across the US. So this chart basically shows the 10 states that are responsible for half of our country's greenhouse gas emissions from buildings. So again, these are direct emissions. This doesn't include the electric grid. So this is emissions literally coming from burning fossil fuels inside your homes and buildings. And so it's essential that we start shifting California off of gas, not just for this climate reason, but also because California is such a large state. So as we start electrifying, as we start getting heat pumps and induction stoves in our home, we're going to transform the market across the US for these advanced electric appliances. So we're going to make it easier for other states to start electrifying. And then also, as we've seen with electric vehicles and commitments to 100% clean energy, as California leads in this way, it normalizes the concept and it raises confidence for other states to do the same. So it's both a market transformation strategy and also a political strategy to spread gas-free homes across the US. So the work that we all do here in California and the city work is really essential for creating a nationwide movement. And then folks, are often saying, well, how much gas are we really using in California and how much emissions are really coming from the buildings? I thought it was all power plants and transportation. And so it's important that we look at the numbers. So this is a pie chart from the California Air Resources Board, right, that inventories our greenhouse gas emissions every few years. They don't use very accurate methane leakage calculations, so we wanted to state that up front. But basically what we see is that residential and commercial buildings, according to CARB, produce 12% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions. That's more greenhouse gas emissions than all of California's power plants. So we need to continue to decarbonize the grid and continue to move towards 100% zero carbon energy on the grid, electricity on the grid. But we also need to decarbonize and get gas out of our homes and buildings if we're going to achieve our climate goals. So we cannot get to the climate goals that Antonina spoke about earlier, zero carbon by 2045, if we keep having gas in our homes and buildings. And I would say that once you factor in upstream methane leakage, this percent goes way up. So CARB uses about 1.5% methane leakage. It's really conservative. That's what the EPA uses, not even what IPCC is using anymore. But when you actually use around 3% leakage, use a 20-year GWP, the greenhouse gas or global warming impact of gas combustion appliances doubles. So with our calculations, it's really buildings, gas use in buildings is responsible for 17%, not 12% of the state's emissions. So just want to clarify that. Great, and now we're going to get to a little bit of a primer on gas-free all-electric buildings. So what are we talking about when we say electrification? Basically, when we're talking about electrification, we're talking about getting rid of all gas end uses in our homes and buildings. So this pie chart represents how the average house in California uses gas. Most people think of their stoves, right? Because that's the one appliance that you can see, and you see it every day, and you use it every day. But in reality, over 90%, roughly 90% of our gas use is for water heating and space heating. This is largely true across the US as well. And then around 10% is for cooking and clothes drying and other end uses. And for every single appliance that we have in our homes today that uses gas, there is a super efficient advanced electric appliance in the market that can replace that. So we're not talking about reach technologies that will come in 10 years or 20 years. These are appliances that are available today, and it's true we need better supply and contractors who are familiar with them and Home Depot to stock them and advertise them, but they are already available today and they're in use across the country and across the world, namely in Europe and Japan. So we're going to spend a moment about what these appliances are, and then we'll get into some of the more exciting stuff, but we want to just build a strong foundation here before we move on. So what the heck is a heat pump? We saw a lot of heat pumps in that last slide. So heat pumps basically transfer warmth in the ambient air, compress it, and then push it through. They compress it to increase the temperature, and they push it through coils either into a tank, like a water tank to heat your water, or into your living room to heat your home. They can also operate in reverse, like they do with refrigerators and air conditioning. So they can also absorb the coolness in the air and make it cooler. So heat pumps can provide heat, and they can also provide cooling. And since they're not creating heat, like a toaster oven uses electric resistance to create heat, super inefficient. Since they're not creating heat, they're using the ambient heat in the air, they're incredibly efficient. So heat pumps are basically 3 to 5 times more efficient than the most efficient gas appliance, 3 to 5 times more efficient than electric resistance. This is a critical point. We're not just talking about getting off of gas and going onto old school space heaters and old school water heaters. We're talking about going to a super efficient technology, and that's really important so we're not going to drive up electricity demand on the grid. So electrification is based on energy efficiency. And then the other technology is induction stoves. And induction is really important, or just flat electric cooking. Traditional electric stoves are really important, especially for indoor air pollution, which Matt's going to talk about in a little bit. And it's also important if we're ever going to be able to cut the gas cord and stop leaking methane in our communities and in our homes. So induction is basically based on magnetic cooking. So you have coils that run a magnet that heat the pot, which heat the food, instead of heating the entire stove in your entire home with a flame or with electric resistance. So it's a super efficient way to cook. It's 0 emissions. You cook really fast. A lot of the top chefs love it. I have an induction stove and I love it. Anyway, so those are the 2 technologies that we're talking about when we talk about electrification.
Okay, so we're going to switch gears here a little bit, and I'm going to talk about some of the hazards of gas and benefits of electrification. So Rachel already laid out the greenhouse gas implications of continuing to rely on gas as a fuel source, but there are a number of other reasons why we want to get gas out of our homes. Public health is a big consideration that many cities are using as justification to adopt electrification ordinances. There was a study done by the Berkeley National Laboratory, and it showed that in a majority of homes that have gas stoves, when those gas stoves are on, the indoor air quality levels would be illegal if they were found outdoors. And this is because people don't use their range hoods, it's because they don't vent their kitchen when they're cooking. And these things that we all do have serious health consequences. There's another study done that showed that children who grow up in homes without gas stoves, or with gas stoves, are 42% more likely to develop asthma when compared to children who grew up in homes without gas stoves. So this is a public health crisis. I mean, think of folks in your life who may have asthma. There's a decent chance that they grew up in a home with a gas stove, and there's a decent chance that that gas stove was either the reason or a contributor to their asthma. So many cities are considering public health when they're looking at reasons to electrify, and it's one of the biggest reasons outside of climate change why we need to electrify our buildings. Safety is another big consideration. So climate change is here, it's real. We know that natural disasters like floods and fires are going to get worse every year because we are on a warming planet. And in a world where those natural disasters happen, we know that gas infrastructure is more vulnerable than electrical infrastructure. There was some analytics done by Sierra Club staff, and it found that on a 5-year time span, there was either a gas fire or gas explosion that killed somebody or sent somebody to the hospital every 4 days in the US. So this is infrastructure in our homes that can have serious consequences to our health and safety. And as climate change gets worse, it's something that cities need to consider when they're thinking about the resiliency of their community. On the flip side, some of the benefits of electrification. So electric appliances in our homes allow us to bring renewable energy into our homes. It also helps with grid power so that we are not using things like gas peaker plants to manage the load. We have more flexible load management when we have heat pump water heaters in our home. There are benefits to jobs. So there was a study done by UCLA recently, and it found that in a high building electrification scenario, on a 20-year time span, we could add over 100,000 jobs to the energy sector, and a majority of these jobs are high road jobs, so jobs that are paying a living wage, a family-sustaining wage. So as we move to meet California's big zero energy goals, electrification can be a solution in terms of job creation. There are lower bills, so this comes in the form of new construction and in your monthly utility use. The Statewide Codes and Standards Team, which is an organization made up of utilities and state regulators, found that in new construction, you can save about $5,000 on a single family home when you build all electric, and up to $2,000 per unit in a multifamily home. In existing buildings that convert to high efficiency appliances, you can save money on your monthly utility costs because these appliances are 3 to 5 times more efficient than their gas counterparts. So you're looking at a savings of $800 annually, which matters for a lot of folks who are living here in California. And then finally, one of the other benefits is that electrification erodes the power of the gas industry. So in the US, about a third of the gas industry sales go to buildings, but 85% of their profits come from the sale of gas in buildings because of the markups on gas. So as we electrify our buildings, even in small increments, 5, 10, 15%, we're going to be taking bigger chunks of their profits and therefore eroding some of their political power. So this is an important part of our strategy in scaling electrification quickly. So another thing I want to talk about is the prevalence of electric buildings already. So there are a number of examples of complicated and interesting buildings that are already all electric. So I'm just going to run through this slide here. We can see a renovated office building, 42,000 square feet in Mountain View, that is now all electric. We can see here UC Santa Cruz, which is actually where I went to for my undergrad, is building some new student housing, and they are going to be using heat pumps for their water heating. This is a laboratory that is in San Diego. Laboratories are pretty complicated buildings. They've got a lot of complex needs, and this laboratory is all electric. They're able to satisfy all those lab needs with electric appliances. Affordable housing is also a viable option through electrification. Those ultra high efficiency appliances are saving renters or owners money on a monthly basis and is an important part of the conversation for how we equitably electrify. The Exploratorium right here in San Francisco is actually an all-electric building. So Exploratorium is kind of a weird place. It's got a lot of interesting things in it, and they're able to meet all of those needs with only electricity. And then maybe a little bit of an elephant in the room. Folks have concerns about electrification in the kitchen. This is the Bradley Terminal at LAX. All of the restaurants in the Bradley Terminal are all electric. So it's possible to electrify your restaurants effectively as well. So the good news is that building electrification is both feasible and growing in popularity. So in fact, if you're looking at this article here, it says day after Christmas, the San Francisco Chronicle had a front page story featuring a homeowner who just converted his home to all electric appliances. You can see those fancy appliances in the front here. I can see nobody recognizes who that person is.
I framed it.
Yeah, so quite exciting. So Wei Tai electrified his home in just 45 days last summer, which is pretty incredible. And as you can see in these photos, he had PG&E disconnect him from the grid in November. It's a big moment. So we're just going to walk through some of those appliances. So you can see he's got a heat pump hot water system. He's got an electric fireplace. So these fireplaces are pretty cool. They use mist and then an LED lighting system to create the illusion of flames without the harmful chemicals in your homes. He's got an induction cooktop looking fancy and new. And then we finally got the heat pump mini split air conditioner / heating system. So you can fully electrify your home, get gas out of your homes in as little as 45 days. If you want to know how to do it, talk to Wei Tai. And then this is also pretty sweet. So not only did Wei Tai electrify his home, he also changed where he's got his power. So those are 14 solar panels on his roof. And Wei Tai is in Marin County Energy Service Territory and is on their deep green plan, which means 100% of the energy for that home is coming from renewable sources. So this is truly a zero emissions home. So the future is here, people are doing it, and you can too.
So now we're going to talk about the policy landscape and opportunities so we all can do what Wei Tai did and how we can make it easier for everyone to electrify. So first, where are we today in terms of the policy landscape? Well, 90% of California's buildings use gas. So we're not in a great place today. And policies have favored gas for heating for decades. And this isn't a big conspiracy. Actually, it's because decades ago, our electricity came from coal plants and electric appliances weren't that efficient. But however, over the past 20 years, now our electricity is now increasingly coming from renewables, and there's been huge gains in electric equipment, making it much more efficient than gas. So we've had technological improvements, but our policies have not caught up with those improvements or with the climate reality where we need to get to. So we're still stuck in a place where our building codes, our incentives, workforce training, all of the policies that lead to the conditions that we have today are biased in favor of gas. So there's a lot of work to be done to sort of unravel that and then start to advance and accelerate electrification policies. We are making some progress, and there's a ton of NGOs and experts, NRDC, Earth Justice, a lot of experts in the room and green builders who have played a huge role in this. The tide is starting to really turn to favor, either to be balanced with gas and electric, or in some cases to favor electrification. We have a long ways to go. So some examples, we're gonna have some new rebates coming out that are gonna lower the upfront costs of getting heat pumps, so that's exciting. We're starting to see electrification pilots, especially for low-income households and in low-income communities like the San Joaquin Valley. So it's great to see utilities focusing on environmental justice in low-income areas with their electrification investments. And then we're also seeing some changes to the state building code, which is called Title 24, which the California Energy Commission updates every 3 years. So we had some big wins last year, basically leveling the playing field for gas and electric and enabling builders to go all electric. And we're hoping for much bigger changes in the 2022 code. And then there's also been rate reform. So we want to make sure that as we electrify, folks aren't getting bumped into higher tiers and ending up spending more on their bills. So SoCal Edison has a pretty good electrification rate that will prevent you from getting bumped up and has a pretty good time of use rate to incentivize you to use electricity when there's solar and wind on the grid. But there's a lot of work to do to make sure that the other utilities offer this kind of electrification friendly rate. So Matt and I tried to categorize what are our 5 main policy platforms or policy issues that we're focusing on with electrification. So I just want to run through this because we see these as the main opportunities to phase gas out of buildings and to do so equitably. So the first is making electrification more affordable, right? We all need to be able to do this. This is not just for early adopters. Low-income folks should be able to electrify as well. So we need new rebate programs and rebate programs that really preference low-income folks and also that incentivize landlords to electrify as well. And then we need inclusive financing, so financing with 0 or very low interest loans that are available to low-income residents as well. And then of course we need rate reform, so we do not get bumped into higher tiers or end up with higher energy bills. And then the second main thing is just we need to stop expanding the gas system. We need to stop making this problem worse. We need to stop new gas hookups. So this is largely work at the city and the state level to reform building codes and to reform construction practices. And as well as with retrofits. That's another major opportunity to start electrifying. And then the third is directing utilities, which have an incredible amount of money in this, to create fuel substitution programs. So right now utilities are spending over $1 billion in their energy efficiency programs, and most of that is subsidizing new gas appliances, right? Because 90% of Californians already have gas, they're getting rebates to get a slightly more efficient gas appliance when their older gas appliance dies. So we were successful with 20 or 30 other stakeholders in reforming a policy at the Public Utilities Commission last summer that now enables utilities to start using their energy efficiency funding for fuel substitution or for electrification. So this is really exciting, and we're going to start to see utilities coming out with new rebate programs to allow you to get a heat pump even if you currently have a gas appliance. Someone here emailed me about this, because right now if you look up PG&E, you want to get a heat pump, they're going to say you're not eligible for this $500 or $300 rebate if you currently have gas. So that roadblock is going away. We expect that to go away this year or next year. But ultimately, the utilities need to be directed to do this. It shouldn't just be a voluntary thing that they create, because we're not going to see this in like San Diego Gas and Electric territory. So all utilities need to be directed to do this. And then the fourth is around tenant protections. So it's essential that as we electrify, that tenants are prioritized and are protected in the transition. So E3, a top energy and climate consulting firm in California, came out with a really powerful study for the Energy Commission last fall, basically showing that low-income people are very vulnerable in an electrified future because they are going to be the last to get off of gas, which means they're going to be bearing this huge cost, this huge fixed cost of the gas system. So we need to make sure that as folks start moving off of gas, that it's not just, that it includes and prioritizes low-income people as well, especially renters who have very little power in this. So these tenant protections are big. We need to make sure that there's no displacement, that there's rent protection, so if landlords get incentives for electrification, they don't end up passing down costs to their tenants, and that we obviously prioritize low-income renters. And then the last is really key, is that we need to start planning for a managed and just transition off of gas. So this is a long-term transition. We have 25 years to transition off the gas system. This is going to impact workers, it's going to impact consumers, ratepayers, utilities. So we need to start a dialogue with many different stakeholders in the room to figure out a strategic way to start contracting the gas system, or pruning the tree, as folks like to call it. And the PUC has opened up a proceeding on gas transition planning that y'all are welcome to join in on. It's gonna be a lot of fun, last a number of years. But we do have the opportunity here. Matt mentioned there's 100,000 new jobs that can come from electrification. We do have the opportunity that in this gas transition planning, that we can really protect workers and plan for a just transition. So that's gonna be essential for this to be successful.
So as we're thinking about these policies, cities play an incredibly important role in our strategy and our success. So cities have less bureaucratic hurdles to surmount when you're comparing them to the state. And therefore cities have more flexibility and more ability to create policies that electrify their buildings or create incentives to electrify their buildings and fit the need of that specific community. So you can see on the map on this slide, there have been a number of places that have already passed building electrification ordinances. And a little bit later, I'm going to talk about the different types of policy options that cities can adopt. But I just wanted to share sort of a visual representation of where some of this work is happening right now. And city leadership is important for a couple of reasons. One, it's important for the residents of that city. Folks are going to be living in buildings that are gas-free. They're going to be having better health outcomes. They're going to be safer in the event of a natural disaster, and they're going to be reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. But folks in those cities are also going to be helping to shape the policy landscape at the state level. So state regulatory agencies are looking at what cities are doing, the state legislature is looking at what cities are doing, and the governor is looking at what cities are doing. And as more cities adopt these policies, it makes it more likely that we get action at the statewide level, which is going to magnify this in a dramatic way. And then thinking even more broadly, right? California is the 5th or 6th largest economy in the entire world. There's almost 50 million people who live here. It's like 1 in 8 Americans. We have the ability to create a real ripple effect across the country, and it starts with cities. It starts locally, and it starts here in the Bay Area.
And we really sort of touched on this already, but I did want to highlight a report that just came out from the Green Lining Institute and Energy Efficiency for All on equitable electrification. So this is an excellent report to check out, sort of advises about how to do electrification equitably. And again, you know, electrification must prioritize low-income folks, and it needs to improve health, resilience, improve our housing, and lower bills. The report also talks about how it's crucial to partner with the affordable housing community and equity groups from the beginning, and to advocate for coordinated repair, renovation, efficiency, and electrification investments. And then it points to all the different things we need to avoid, which we already talked about: displacement, increased rents, having the stranded costs, stranded assets be fallen upon low-income ratepayers, and then also missing capital investment cycles. So there's very few capital investment cycles for affordable housing, so when one comes up, we need to make sure that it includes not just efficiency, but also electrification.
So I also want to talk a little bit about sort of labor and where they are on electrification right now. So the short story is that it has been a mixed response so far, and that response we think has been largely influenced by the local utilities' perspective on building electrification. So for example, here in Northern California, PG&E has been fairly receptive towards building electrification. They sent folks to speak in support of it at the Berkeley vote that happened back in July that I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with. And a lot of the local unions are neutral or favorable towards electrification. There's a lot of education and communication and sort of policy solicitation that needs to happen, but there is not the same sort of hostility we're seeing in Southern California. So in contrast, SoCalGas is firmly opposed to building electrification. They are running misinformation campaigns and actively trying to derail these efforts as they happen. And some of the unions that are connected to SoCalGas are also expressing, at least at this point, unfavorable views on building electrification. So part of that is that there just are real challenges that exist right now. For example, plumbers and pipe fitters could see real job loss moving forward in a building electrification future. There just will be less pipes in the ground because the gas infrastructure won't be there. Another potential challenge is that residential electrification work is typically not union work, and so unions don't see an incentive to get behind electrification because they won't be getting those jobs. And so there's real policy work that needs to be done to find solutions that work for these unions and for these construction types. On the flip side, there are a number of opportunities. So we know that California is going to electrify. We've got these big climate goals, and there's a real opportunity for a managed transition and for a just transition. So the job study that I mentioned earlier out of UCLA is part of that. If California invests in retraining for some of its utility workers, we can see people move into a new industry and be paid a living wage, and that can ease some of this switching that's happening and bring in constituencies that might be skeptical at this point. How we're doing that, we're doing outreach to local IBEWs, building trades. We're supporting research and new policy approach that can support job growth for these unions that may be affected. So there's a lot of work to be done here. We're sort of scratching the surface and hope to do a lot more of that in 2020. So if you have connections with local labor, like personally I'd be interested in talking to you because we're looking for ways to find solutions. So to get back to some of what I was talking about earlier, what can cities do? So there are a number of policy vehicles that cities can adopt in order to electrify. And so I want to touch briefly on what some of those policy options are. So REACH codes are also called building codes. It's just the standard that a builder has to adhere to in a city. There are all electric codes for new construction, and that simply means that if you want to build a new building, it has to have all electric appliances. There are electric preferred codes, and those essentially create disincentives for building with gas. So you have to meet higher energy efficiency standards if you're building with gas in your home, and that costs more money. And so developers who are interested in turning a profit are steered towards all electric construction, though if you really want to build with gas, you can. And there's also mixed reach codes. So you can have codes that apply to some appliances have to be all electric and others don't, or certain building types can be all electric and others are only in the preferred category. There's also a Berkeley-style gas ban or electrification ordinance. So Berkeley used the city's police powers to ban natural gas hookups in new constructions. They said that this is a threat to the health and safety of our residents, and so you can't do it here anymore. It's another approach and something that a number of cities have considered. One thing that we've seen the last couple of months, and maybe is worth sharing in this room, the gas industry themselves and news media that is opposed to electrification and renewable energy, I'm gonna let you guess who, is picking up on gas bans as a term to rile up opposition. And so we've recently started talking about these ordinances in terms of electrification ordinances. Other actions that cities can take, so climate action plans are pretty popular up here. There are ways to include electrification ordinance, or excuse me, electrification language in these climate action plans. They're updated every couple of years, and so there's opportunity for input to shape what caps look like. Cities can also set emission standards for large existing buildings. So it basically requires a building to reduce its annual greenhouse gas emissions every year, and those emission numbers have to get smaller on a yearly basis, and eventually the economics flip and it makes more sense to electrify. And then cities can push for state action. So by passing a really aggressive policy locally, you're helping to shift the conversation in Sacramento or in whatever city you may be in. To get even more granular, how can you, the people in this room, affect city policy? There are a number of ways to do that. So number one is education and lobbying. We talked about this earlier, but outside of sort of energy wonk and energy policy space, there really isn't good awareness about building electrification. If you went and told a friend that you went to a building electrification talk, they wouldn't know what you were saying, right? Like, there's just a lack of awareness. And so elected officials are people too. They also may not know about this issue, and so talking to them about it makes an impact. Taking some of the resources that you gained here tonight and bringing that to an elected official in a one-on-one meeting or a small group meeting can help get the ball rolling. It can get them to direct their staff to start looking into this, and it can turn into an ordinance. The flip side of that is making a comment at a public meeting. So city councils meet on a regular basis. They're open to the public. You can get up and make a 2 or 3 minute statement, and that statement can, again, inspire city staff or elected officials to take action and to get the ball rolling. So one of the activities we're going to do later revolves around that, but it is a really important civic tool that folks should be utilizing. Coalition building and outreach is another valuable tool. So folks here, a lot of y'all are a part of Climate Reality Project or other environmental groups in the Bay Area. That's great. We need to widen the pool of people who care about this issue. We need to be reaching out to other stakeholders because it affects them and because it can help us be more effective. So affordable housing groups should be a part of our coalition because of the benefits that electrification can bring to housing affordability. We need to be engaging the public health community, right? Having a doctor stand up and talk about how gas stoves can cause asthma is compelling. We need those voices in the room. Reaching out to environmental justice communities, reaching out to labor, reaching out to youth groups, community builders, developers. The more voices that you have in the room and the more varied those voices are, the bigger impact that you're going to have. We saw that come together in some of the cities that have passed these ordinances in the last year. And if we want to make progress in places that are less receptive to these kind of policies, we need more people asking for them. The media also matters, so you would be surprised how easy it is to get into a local paper. If you write a letter to the editor or an op-ed, especially if you're in a smaller community, it's fairly likely that you'll get your piece published. And again, elected officials watch that kind of stuff. Social media is a great way to target elected officials too. I don't use Twitter. Lots of people don't use Twitter, but elected officials especially are on Twitter. They pay attention to what people are tweeting about them. If you want your representative to know what you're thinking, tweet them, right? And especially in a room like this, if we all got out our phones and tweeted, I'm now wishing that I'd set up that activity, we could tweet at an elected official right now and they would see the message that we have. So think about the groups that you have, think about the message you want to communicate, and then use social media to achieve that. And then grassroots advocacy. So all of these sort of things that I've listed are grassroots advocacy, but some of these other tactics are also useful. So petitions and letters to council members matter. Having a big volunteer and activist team matters, so people who are able to consistently show up and engage, that makes an impact. And then public events. So if you have an all-electric building in your town, having an event there to celebrate it can raise the profile of the issue and get people excited. If you have an electric home, getting a article written about you goes a long way to highlight the issue to the community. So think about those spaces that exist and then highlight them to your advantage. There are lots of opportunities to move the needle. So last year we saw a ton of momentum. Across the state, there were 23 cities and counties who passed building electrification ordinances of some sort. There are a number of other ones who are going to pass ordinances this year. These are just some of the cities that are moving forward this year. We expect another 25, probably more, to pass some sort of electrification ordinance this year. And so if your city is on this list, you should look up when the next city council meeting is and show up and make a comment asking for them to go further, to think about retrofits and renovations so that we can get the ball moving on this. Yeah.
We're almost wrapping up, but we do want to spend a moment talking about gas industry opposition, because this is really big. So as Matt said earlier, 85% of the revenue that gas utilities get from delivering gas to end users comes from you and me, comes from residential and commercial ratepayers. So they are freaking out. Once we did the Berkeley gas ban, then we got a few other cities doing either a gas ban or electrification ordinance, they started getting really, really concerned. And they started investing millions of dollars in stopping electrification progress, both in California, in Massachusetts, in Washington. They're doing preemption bills in Arizona and Tennessee. They're trying to promote renewable gas in Minnesota, in Colorado. So they are trying to stop our progress, promote a false solution, which is quote unquote renewable gas or biomethane, and establish preemption that would basically block cities from being able to adopt these ordinances. So we need to be aware that the gas industry is very quickly mobilizing. There's lawsuits against a number of cities that have adopted electrification ordinances that the cities are challenging, and that many NGOs, including the Sierra Club, are also challenging to defend the cities. And so we just need to be aware that the gas industry is huge. They have a lot of money, but they don't have people power. And that's what we all have, is people power, and we have the facts are on our side. So it's really important, as Matt said, to do this coalition building work and to turn out our neighbors and our families to all these city council events, because that's what's going to sway council, especially here in Northern California. So yeah, we need to think about all of our spheres of influence, whether it's local companies, whether it's students, whether it's doctors, and get them to show up and just be there ourselves. Speaking truth to power. And we're going to talk a little bit about what is the gas industry message to try to defeat this electrification movement.
Great. So we are coming towards the final stretch here, but I just want to highlight some talking points and resources that are available for folks in the room here. So some of the messaging that we know works, and I would encourage all of y'all to adopt when you are engaging with your friends, family, elected officials, whoever. The affordability piece of it is huge. California is in the middle of a housing crisis, and the fact that electrification allows us to build more cheaply and to pay less on our utility bills is super compelling, but to people who maybe don't think about climate change as the #1 priority, they will be thinking about housing affordability, and so this matters. The climate crisis, obviously preaching to the choir here. The health and safety and air quality is another important one to touch on. Safety and resiliency is another thing that matters. We think about these oil pipelines and these oil trains that can go through our communities and throw ash up into the air or explode. That same sort of dangerous fuel is in our homes, and so making sure that people are aware of that matters. The jobs angle is important. We can add jobs that pay a family-sustaining wage through building electrification. And cooking. So cooking, I think, is a double-edged sword. Some of the benefits of induction are that you can boil water more quickly, you're not releasing harmful fumes into your kitchen, you're reducing your greenhouse gas emissions. So targeting those benefits matters. And as we get more celebrity chefs and sort of the restaurant industry in general on board, we can talk about how they love it too. There are a number of resources that are available for folks. So the Building Electrification Action Plan that was highlighted at the beginning is downloadable. Everybody in this room can get that. There's a ton of really great information in there. It's, I don't know, like a lot of pages.
Yeah, like 30 pages.
Yeah. So I'd encourage you to read that if you want to go deep on some of this stuff. We also have sample ordinance language. So if you have a city council member who's interested in doing this, but they don't know how to introduce it, we have language that they can take, modify for their city, and then introduce. We've got fact sheets, petitions, templates for comment letters to city officials, messaging guidance, analysis on a number of these factors. So if you need support, if you need resources, there have been a lot of great groups and organizations and people who've been working on this, and we'd love to share it with you. And if there are resources that are not on this list and you want them, you should also follow up with that, because we want to make sure that we're giving people everything they need to move on this.
I just want to highlight that, Matt and I are from the Sierra Club, but this is actually a really large movement of NGOs and community groups and experts and builders that are all working towards the same end. So we have Menlo Spark in the room. They've been doing incredible work in the South Bay. Everyone should speak with Diane Bailey if you live in the South Bay about what to do there. There's a lot of experts here already, and I just wanted to highlight some of the logos of the NGOs and businesses that are leading this fight for a gas-free all-electric future. And hopefully when we come back, we have a meeting next year, it's going to be 3 or 4 or 5 slides full of logos. So the movement is growing, and we really look forward to working with all of you.
Aren't these two fantastic speakers? Give them a hand.